are you? It is great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today and being a part. Before we dive into our brand new series today, let me tell you what else is happening, because there's a lot. Today is what we call our summer kickoff, meaning like everything just kind of transitions today into a summer series of ministry, things that we do. And some of that is some really great stuff. It kind of affects us all in different ways. Tonight, I know we're baptizing down at the river. Super excited about that. Your kids, we're going to sugar them up real good with some popsicles as they leave today, because school's out, and they're moving into new classes and stuff even as they enter today, and that's a big deal. And we're kicking off a brand new series today. There's a lot going on. Our kids are about to go to camp. Our students are about to go to camp in a week. Just lots of summer kind of things. But one of the things that is so vital, and I think it's so vital around summer, is that it is easy. It's so easy for us as Jesus followers who have this thing that Jesus started called the church that we all gather around. It's so easy for us to disconnect during the summer. Now, we get it that life changes. It does for us too, right? So sometimes that looks a little different how we do that, but there's one part of what we do as a church that just never changes. Now, that's called groups. Circles, we say, are better than rows, and in a small group of people, which is a few people that gather around and pray for each other and love on one another and help one another. I'll tell you, one of my biggest frustrations as a pastor is to get this phone call that somebody's upset that they've been hurt or they've been in the hospital or something broke down in their life, and now they're upset at me or they're upset at us, and we literally didn't know about it. And you know what my first question always is? Whose group are they in? Because when you have a group of people around you who are trying to follow Jesus along with you, all of a sudden the communication of what's going on in your life happens within that little micro church, and you have people who know what's going on with you. And in the bigger context, someone can reach out to us, and we can help and support there as well as the larger church. But the truth is that real church, real life, real ministry happens within these groups. And I'm telling you, it is such a benefit for my life, for the group of guys I'm in a group with, and we meet every single Monday night. It is an amazing thing to have those guys in my life. They know what's going on and things that other people just don't know, because it's that context for us to be able to do that. And if we don't have this, if we're not gathering, if we're not circling up, it is so easy to disconnect over the summer, because life just kind of changes. So I want to challenge you. Today also kicks off our summer series, our summer session of groups. And so if you don't have a group, no matter where you live, right? There are people gathering close to where you are, and I want to tell you how to get there. In fact, on that U card that you have in the seat, on the bottom of that, there's a QR code, and if you'll scan that, it will take you right to the page where you can find a group. And if you're not in a group, I'm not even asking, I'm kind of begging you to get in one, right? And the reason is for all of those things I just said. It is part of us becoming who God intended for us to be, is to allow other people in our life to be able to move forward and to be able to support us and for us to support them. Because a group is where you love and you're loved. It's where you support and you're supported. It's where you teach and you learn. It is where you walk along in life with other people. And it's not all about just doing a Bible study. It's about actually hanging out and being in each other's life. So groups, such a vital thing. And look, find a group where you live. Find a group where you are. Pick one and just go. Now, I tell people this all the time. Like, I went to a group and it just didn't work for me. I was like, okay, well, every once in a while you get the dork group, right? I mean, I don't know how to tell you that, but every once in a while you just walked into the dork group and it's like, yeah, that doesn't fit me at all, right? And if you walk in and everybody's wonderful in the group, then maybe you're the dork in the group, right? I mean, maybe it's happened, right? But the fact is like you say, oh, I was in a group, it just didn't work for me. Try again. Find your people. Let us help you find your people. They exist within the context of the church. It is how God set it up for us to grow. So Get yourself a group and let's go. If you can't find what you're looking for off of that U card and the QR code, then walk right out those doors when this service is over and walk right up to that big sign that says, "How can I help?" And they will help you right then connect to a group and maybe even introduce you to a leader or somebody, but put you in connection with them. It's just that vital. Well, I'm glad you're here today because, again, as we kick off the summer, it also is a new series for us. And so let's kick off this series with a question. And here's the question for us. When was the last time you asked this question? Why am I doing this? I don't know if maybe you've asked that question lately, but with a series called Bounce Back, I just kind of felt like it was appropriate to at least define that a little bit. Like, why am I doing this? And isn't it true that no matter what the this is for you, isn't it true that sometimes you wonder, why am I doing this? You ever had those little moments in life that they kind of stick out in your memory and you don't even know why you remember it, but you remember it? So when I was thinking through this series and getting ready, I had one of those moments come to mind. And some years ago, I was in the gym, and I remember this guy that was in there, and I just got to be honest, he looked great, right? I mean, he looked great. He looked like he knew his way around the gym, you know. He looked like the kind of guy that never skipped leg day, right? Really, or any day for that matter. And he was wearing one of those little spandex things that wrestlers wear, you know, the onesie. And I got to be honest with you, as weird as it may sound, he owned that thing, right? I mean, like, he owned it. I mean, it was working for him. Me, no way, but that wouldn't go well. But for this guy, I'm just telling you, that onesie was going great for him, right? And I was kind of over on the treadmill, kind of doing my thing, skipping leg day. And he had been over there doing some squats. And so after his squats, what was weird is he would get up, he'd come out of that squat rack and he'd walk over to the mirror. And it was like there was nobody else in the gym. And he'd take his leg up there and he would just flip it and go, ugh. And those muscles would just rock like that. And I mean, it's like, I'm not just going to do this. I'm going to do it and see what happens. Right? It's just, right? And he did this like 4 or 5 times. I mean, it's like he could just care less who was actually in the gym. He was under the spotlight. It was just that dude in a onesie in the mirror, and that's it, right? He could have just, right? Just like that. I don't know if I have a big point to that story, other than if you're here today, sir, well done, right? Well done. Now, seriously, I remember thinking, what's all that for, right? Why is this guy really doing this? Like somehow, is he, and of course I'm being all judgmental on the treadmill, right? But like I'm thinking is somehow he's gonna have this epic moment in life one day where he's dating this girl and he's over at their apartment and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't get the pickle jar open. And he's gonna walk over and go, ugh, right? Is that what this was about? I'm like, why are you doing this? What is it you're actually working for in doing this? And so when you ask the question, why am I doing this? What is it that I'm actually fighting for? And so today, here's what I want to try to convince you of in this series, and I want you to know I'm convinced, but I really want to convince you that there are times in life when you are going to be knocked down and just want to walk away. A friendship, a job, a marriage, a church, a small group, a responsibility, a commitment, and not just walk away, but sometimes you have a desire to actually fight against it, not just walk away from it. And so instead, I want us to be willing to fight for something when we ask, why am I even doing this? And let me just, spoiler alert right here at the beginning of the series. We titled this series Bounce Back because I want to convince all of us to move towards this, resilience. Resilience. Resilience is so important to life, and yet it's easy to let what happens in life take us out rather than make us resilient as we bounce back. So to get us all on the same page, let's use a very simple definition of resilience. That resilience is simply this: bouncing back from disruption. And all of us, we know what disruption is. We all have those in our life. Sometimes something has disrupted, maybe in your day already. Something has disrupted your week and it's just getting started. In fact, when you think about things that disrupt us, that maybe have disrupted your life lately, I think of things that are maybe simple, like traffic disrupts us, pollen, allergies. I mean, it's like spring and your allergies have sprung, right? And there are things that like we can joke about, like the weather, like we've had too much rain, or we've had too much sun, or now we have too much heat, or like your car battery died, or your phone service was spotty, or you got bad internet or slow computer, and we could go on and on and on this spectrum of disruptions of things that happen to us. And we could also take these to relational challenges. And so maybe you've got something going on with your kid. Or maybe you've got something going on with your parents. Maybe you've got rebellious kids and aging parents. Maybe you've got aging kids and rebellious parents, right? Maybe you've got health problems, or it's a job layoff, maybe some quite a bit more significant things, because there's this whole spectrum of disruptions, from the ones that can just be an aggravation in our day, all the way to the ones that just completely jack us up. The idea of resilience is really what allows us to bounce back from those disruptions. But before I go any further, I just want to say, I know, as a pastor who loves you, I know there are some of you who are going through some significant stuff. And look, I'm not sure I can offer any kind of advice or any emotional support, even to some of the more difficult things that you may be going through. But what I absolutely know is that God has something for you in this as well. And so as we talk, maybe what may feel like for some of you the more simple disruptions that seem maybe less important maybe than what you're going through, just know that those are actually related to the bigger ones, and resilience is the thing that connects them all together. In fact, being resilient is the ability to bounce back. It's like to roll with the punches and to deal with the setbacks in a positive and a creative way. I mean, resilience involves seeing a challenge more like an opportunity to learn and to get involved with that challenge or that disruption to the degree that it literally has minimal effect on your physical and emotional or mental state. Disruptions, they're really all about change in life, right? Something's changed. In fact, I read this quote the other day from Alvin Toffler, and here's what he said. He said, "Change is avalanching upon our heads, and most people are grotesquely unprepared to cope with it." I'll tell you, the first thought I had when I read that was, wow, Alvin, what is happening in your life when you wrote that? But it's just really so true, and I think all of us experience major change at different times in our life, and the truth is most of us are just not prepared to deal with it. And the reason why is because of the uncertainty of what's happening, right? You didn't see it coming. And you didn't even know it was out there. And so whether you consider yourself a resilient person or not, I just want you to know that whatever is happening with you right now, those smaller, less meaningful disruptions are actually building something that can get us ready for the bigger ones. I want to show you what I mean by that, because I think visually this probably will help. So I drew a little graph this week, and I just called it the bouncing back graph, right? And maybe you've seen something like this where you've got the y-axis and the x-axis here, our line. And then down here we've got time, and over here we've got morale, right? This awesome word, morale, like how you're feeling about life. And the way change or disruption happens is like this, is we hit a little bump, right? We hit a bump and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. So there's a little bit of maybe something happening there where we just kind of like, oh, we can just ignore that, and maybe there's a little denial in all of that, and we're just going, this can't be happening. And then all of a sudden there's this huge dip down into the pit, down into the valley, and this huge decline in our morale because of what's happening. And so we spend some time down there in the valley, but then there's this way that we can bounce back from what we're going through, and there's this way to where there's this upward trend out of the valley, and it can actually be something that what happened ends up being something to our benefit. And you know this is true because you've experienced this in your own life, a change or something that broke and you couldn't fix it. And it was terrible. And then on the other side of it, you actually got to a place where you were actually better because of what happened and what broke. And that's the way disruption or change can work, right? So what's interesting about this little graph is that somebody actually came along and at some point said, if you overlay the stages of grief on top of a little graph like this, it sort of aligns perfectly. 40 or 50 years ago, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gave us what we now know are stages of grief. And it actually does begin with denial right here. I can't believe this is happening. It's almost a shock. I don't want to think about it. And then we begin to realize this is happening, and now I'm angry about it. And that includes some blame in that anger, because now you're blaming someone, maybe other people, which is kind of how it starts. And then we start shifting that blame to ourselves. And it's like, oh, this is my fault. I did something wrong. And then, you're moving into this bargaining kind of stage where you bargain with God or you bargain with another person. I mean, your car battery died. You even bargained with your car. Come on, please start, right? Like if you'll start, I promise you I'll get the oil changed. I will give you new oil, right? So we're bargaining with our car, all in that anger stage. And then what happens is we move into despair, which is just serious emotion. Despair or depression. And this is the valley when it kind of all finally hits you of what's happened. And then somewhere in that valley, as we begin to look at, we just accept that this is what happened. And when we begin to accept this is what happened, it's begin to accept the disruption. You begin to accept the change. Maybe we start seeing a little bit of things in a more positive light than we did when we were completely in the valley. And then all the way up here is thriving. Not just I've survived something, but my life is actually thriving now, and I see my life is actually better than where it was. I'm not just making it through, I'm actually doing better than I was. Do you know what I've come to believe about resilience? Is that resilience is a catalyst. Resilience is what allows us to get through that curve quickly and to experience the change or the disruption with less impact that's not as heavy on us. In fact, I think resilience is a little bit like getting TSA pre-check, that clearance. I think resilience is even better because I think resilience is kind of like getting clear plus TSA pre-check. You still got to go through TSA. You just learn to do it with more speed and with less stress and with your shoes on. Because really, that's kind of what resilience is about, is moving through it. You got to go through it, but you move through it a little differently. Now look, all that I've said, you could go, hey, I agree with that or I don't, but here's the point. You could just take my word for all that I've said. But what I'd rather do is introduce you to someone who actually taught about resilience, someone who actually experienced some significant things that proved he understood resilience in a way that most of us will never have to. And the guy's name is James. And James is famous because he was a brother of Jesus. And he ended up as the pastor in Jerusalem. So yeah, kind of a big deal to be the brother of Jesus. I mean, I was thinking about that this week, thinking about those guys growing up and it's dark, they're laying in bed, and his brother Jesus is like, hey man, I just want to let you know, James, that I'm from God. And can't you imagine teenage James going, yeah, that's totally fine with me, man, like, yeah, like me too. And out of the dark, Jesus says, no, I think you misunderstand. I am God. And can you imagine James being like, oh, okay, well, that's cool if that's what you want to believe, but can you please not say that at school tomorrow when we get there, right? That's not really going well for me. But obviously then his brother began to do miracles that proved he really was God, and then actually gave his life and eventually was resurrected from the dead. And it was in that moment when his brother came back to life that James actually put his faith in his brother. Like, oh my gosh, my brother really is God. And James believed that so deeply that he gave his life for it. Because James eventually was martyred for believing his brother was God. Some people say he was stoned, like the rock kind, not the other kind. Some people think he was beaten with a club until he died and gave up his life. And look, the truth is, either way, this guy knows something about resilience that we don't know. This isn't a guy who went through a breakup in middle school. This is significance. And what James has to say in this letter that he writes to Jewish believers in Jerusalem who were now followers of Jesus, he tells them a little bit about some of the trials that they're going to be facing and how to handle them. And James is talking about how do you deal with the disruptions? How do you get ready for the changes that are coming in life? And here's what James begins his letter with. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters. He's like, hey, I'm not preaching at you. You're my family. You're my brothers and sisters. I want to encourage you. So consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds. He's not saying if you do, he's saying when you do, because trials and change and disruptions, everybody's going to experience them. And James is going to tell us how well you do is determined by your attitude, which is why he began with consider it pure joy. And that verb, consider, I don't think we really grasp all the meaning of it because it was written in another language, and sometimes it means one thing in English and another thing in that language. This is more than just consider. When James said consider, here's what he meant in his language. He meant lead yourself to the point where you believe it. Regard it already as so. Train yourself to see it differently and believe that it's true. He's not saying, I'm asking you to be joyful about what's happening. He's saying, would you consider that you could have joy as you go through what's happening? And isn't it true that our attitude about something is based on how we think about things? I mean, one guy said, your attitude determines your altitude. And when you come into a change or a disruption or a trial and you didn't know it was coming and all of a sudden there it is, do you think about it as traumatic? Or do you see it as an opportunity to learn and to grow? Because the truth is, disruptions are only as traumatic as we experience them or choose to believe them to be. And how do we know that? It's actually been proven over and over and over again that your attitude towards it makes all the difference in the world. I read this study that was done. The study ended just a few years ago. And it was a 30-year study on a group of 600 kids who were born and raised in the inner cities in our nation. They followed these kids throughout their life for 30 years to figure out what is the difference in the kids who were raised in the inner city that were able to succeed in life and the kids that were not. We're talking about all 600 were bombarded by some of the circumstances that surrounded them by growing up in the inner city. And what they found was that the most resilient kids had what they termed as an internal locus of control, which is that thing in you that you believe, I'm actually more in control of what happens to me than what previously believed. Not I, not my circumstances are what's going to affect my achievements. And the study said that resilient children actually saw their own future as something that they could determine. These resilient kids who grew up in the inner city, they actually could impact the world. Not just that the world had to have an impact on them. And it was all about their perspective of how they saw the world. And that is exactly what James is telling us. That if you would choose to consider it pure joy, then you actually could have a different experience with what you're going through or what's coming. That you could actually be active in your own fate. It's not life is just happening to you, it's that you are also happening to life. And this is what he's saying. Just consider that there's something good in it that when you go through that trial, when you go through that change or that disruption, that there's something good in it. But he doesn't stop there. He goes on. And here's what he says. He says, because you already know this, he says, that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. That when your faith gets tested, it actually produces a next level depth to your faith. I know some of you are endurance athletes, which I love that phrase, by the way. I mean, like you run marathons and triathlons, just fantastic. I don't get you or understand you, but I am wildly impressed by you, right? Just don't get you, right? And here's why. Let me tell you why I don't get you. It's not that I don't understand athletics or competition. I get all that. But when I was playing sports growing up and you did what you weren't supposed to do you know what coaches made you do? Endurance sports, right? They made you run and run and run. And so I've just always kind of equated long distance running with punishment. And so look, I see you, I don't get you, right? But I would imagine as an endurance athlete, you would agree that you have created and built perseverance and endurance. I mean, you didn't just jump up one day and said, I'm going to go get me one of those 26.2 stickers, right? No, you probably said, I'm going to run a mile, or I'm going to run a couple of miles, or I'm going to run a 5K or a 10K or a half or a full. And some of you do those like super extra ones. And honestly, there aren't very many people in the world that actually do that. They're like a unicorn and maybe actually remarkable person to be able to run like 30 marathons in 30 days. But it's all about building something, it's training for something, it's working out this perspective, not just perseverance to survive, but to actually be able to bounce back and thrive in the disruption. And then James says, and if you do, there's a payoff. He says, look, would you consider it joy? That when you go through the trial, that it will develop this thing in you, this depth of strength, that will lead to something. And then he gives us this promise. He gives us the payoff. Here's what he says. He says, would you let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything? He's saying, for you to get where you want to go, you got to go through the stuff that you're in the middle of. And isn't it true that it is our temptation when the disruption comes, it is our temptation to avoid the pain. And he says, no, you're going to try to fight against it with everything in you. But I'm telling you, instead of fighting against the pain, would you consider fighting for it? Fighting for the resilience that's being built in you. This is how we get ready for tomorrow and what's coming. And look, I'm not trying to be a defeatist or depress anyone or trying to scare anyone, but can I just tell you, there is something around the corner for all of us. There's something coming for all of us that we didn't know was coming. And instead of fighting against those smaller disruptions, James says, would you consider that there's actually something in it for you to learn in the annoying person you work with? That there's actually something in it for you in traffic that you bump into? In the disruption of your life, there's actually something for you in it. There's something for you to learn that if you would take it in and allow it to have its way, that it would get you ready for the bigger disruption coming tomorrow. And look, no matter how much resilience you have today, isn't it true it would benefit all of us to have more for tomorrow? So would you consider not fighting against what's happening, but maybe fighting for what's happening so that you could gain resilience? I've found that the only way that we win in the big trials is when we fought for what we can get in the smaller ones. You win in life by fighting for resilience in the smaller disruptions of life so that you're ready for the big ones. Everything in you is going to want to go around the disruption. Everything in you is going to want to have that disruption just removed. Everything in you is going to want to go over it or under it or around it. But James is saying, hey, if you want to get better for it, you've got to go right through the middle of it. And if you will, there is a catalyst that will happen in you that will allow you to learn how to get through it faster with less impact so that God can make you into the person that he wants you to become. And that is so important. That's such an important thought to know that the general purpose for all of us is that we would become the person that God always intended for us to be. And the only way to become that person is to go through the trial, through the disruption, through the change. And as you go through the smaller ones, you begin to build up resilience so that when the bigger one comes along, it may knock you down, but it won't knock you out. Because that's what resilience is. In fact, resilience is the difference between the trial knocking you out and you bouncing back to where God wants to take you. It's the difference between the disruption damaging your life, destroying your world, and actually getting you to a place where you can not just get through it, but that you actually become the person God intended for you to be through it as you go through it. That's resilience. You say, okay, Shane, sounds great. Where do we start? What's the first step in the process? So hear me clearly. The first step really is in finding the purpose for the pain, for the problem that you're in, for the purpose of the trial. But I want to go on record to tell you that's a lot easier in the smaller disruptions. Because I'm telling you, the bigger ones, you may never know the purpose. And if you're in the middle of it, and I don't want to minimize what you're going through, but now may not be the time for you to be looking for the purpose. But when it comes to the smaller ones, you've got to see the purpose. You've got to see that there is more and that God is developing something in you and growing you. In fact, what it truly is a change of perspective, which happens by a simple switch of a question. Because most people I know, it's certainly true in my life, most people ask this question in the middle of the trials and the pains. We say, okay, why is this happening to me? God, are you kidding me? Really, this? This is ridiculous. And I don't know if you sanitize your prayers sometimes like maybe I do, maybe you don't, but we've all asked the question, why is this happening to me? But a change of perspective, instead, James would encourage us to maybe ask a different question. And James is saying, would you consider asking the question, God, what are you trying to grow in me? I'm not trying to figure out, did you cause this, God, or did it just happen because it's happening? And if it's happening, yes, God can redeem it, and he can bring something good out of it. He can actually bring you to the point where you look back on it and you go, wow, had I not been through that valley, I would have never become the person that I am without going there. I'm not saying I like it, and I'd never wish it on anyone. But God used it to build something in me. And not just for today, he's building something in me for tomorrow and for the next thing that's coming. And that's what you want. That's becoming mature. That's becoming complete. The truth is the world we live in is a very dangerous, broken place, right? There's a lot out there. And in many ways, we are more vulnerable than we've ever been. There might be more today going on that could knock us out than maybe ever before. But here's what I want to remind you of. We might be more vulnerable than we've ever been, but we are stronger than we ever could have imagined because we have a God who says, I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be right there with you as we go through this. We have a God who's saying, I'm going to be the God when you're on the mountaintop. I'm God when everything's going good. But I'm also that same God when you're in the valley. I am the God of the wilderness too. I'm God even in the bad. And it's so easy to believe, God, if I follow you, everything's going to be great. Those of you who are getting baptized today, I hate to bust your bubble before you ever get in the water. We all know that's not true. You've decided to follow Jesus and you're going to get baptized and tell the world, and you're thinking this is going to be great. And it is in so many ways. But there's all kinds of pain. And just because you decide to follow Jesus doesn't mean you get to avoid pain. In fact, sometimes it's worse. Because sometimes people throw rocks at you and stone you until you're dead. And sometimes you're following Jesus and you get beaten with a club. Sometimes you're a martyr in the most literal sense. But Jesus himself promised this. And I love this verse because it really holds up when you get knocked down. And one of Jesus' closest friends, John, heard him say it, and here's what he wrote down that Jesus said. Jesus said, I've told you these things so that in me, Jesus says, you may have peace. In me, you can have peace. And then he says this, oh, and by the way, in this world, you will have trouble. Like, don't be surprised. Don't be shocked that this happened to you. And then he gives us this phrase with this big, awesome meaning packed in it. And I love this phrase in this verse. He says this next. But take heart. Get back up. I know you got knocked down. Get yourself up. Keep your eyes fixed on me. Take heart. There's gonna be trouble in your world. I know that. Get up. And then he concludes with these powerful words. Jesus said this, get up, for I have overcome everything you're facing in your world. And when he said this, they didn't even know what it meant. They didn't even understand the reality of it yet. But he's begging and challenging them, listen, I know the troubles that are coming, and I'm just telling you, in the trouble, you can take heart. Because I'm doing something in you. I'm doing something in your trouble. And I didn't cause it, and I hate it that it's happening to you. But it will not be lost, and it will not be wasted. And you can believe with as much assurance as you have, Jesus is saying, that I'm going to use it for your good, and I'm going to bring something good out of the most broken parts of your life and what's happened to you. And in the middle of it all, I'm going to build resilience that will make you mature and complete and better so that you'll never lack it in anything. I don't know why you have to move. I don't know why they did what they did. I don't know why life is changing. I don't know why the relationship broke. I don't know why they died. I don't know why it closed. I don't know why the finances are in trouble. I don't know why you lost your job. I don't know why the pollen's high. I don't know. I just know he can use it and build something in us that your pain and your trials, they somehow complete you as a Jesus follower. But let me remind you that resilience doesn't happen passively. It doesn't happen by wishing for it or hoping for it, for the struggle to go away. You got to get back up. And you got to fight for it. Because resilience happens when you stand back up and you walk through it, even as scary as it may be. And God says, when you do, I'll walk with you. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for what we learn from you, who you are, what you've done for us. And Father, it's an amazing, amazing thing when we think about your son, Jesus, and the fact he taught us this resilience with his life. Thank you for James, who had a front row seat to that. Thank you for John, who was by his side through it all. So that we have these documents that help us even have the thought to consider what we're going through as joy. And so, God, I pray for each person here today, those who are watching, those who are here, God, for whatever's going on. And we don't know why, but you do. And I pray that they would have the courage to stand up, get back up, and not fight against the pain, but to literally fight for it because of what it produces in us. And we know we need your help for that. So would you give us the courage through your Spirit in us to do just that? We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.